I didn't think anything was wrong. That's the part that still bothers me. Looking back, there were signs everywhere, but at the time, it all felt manageable, temporary, something I could deal with later. I didn't know later was already gone. She used to sit across from me at the kitchen table, scrolling on her phone while I answered emails. We weren't fighting. We weren't even arguing. We were just quiet. At first, I told myself that was normal. We'd been together long enough that silence didn't scare me anymore, or at least I thought it didn't. Her name was Claire. We met years earlier, before my life started feeling like a series of deadlines instead of days. Back when conversations didn't need a purpose. Back when listening felt easy. She used to talk about small things, things I didn't realize mattered. How her day felt longer than it should have. How she missed feeling chosen, not just included. How sometimes she wondered if this was all life was supposed to be. I nodded. I said, "That makes sense." Then I went back to what I was doing. I wasn't trying to ignore her. I just assumed love could wait while I handled everything else. Work, responsibilities, the version of myself I thought I needed to become. I kept telling myself, once this project is over, once things calm down, once I'm less tired. I didn't realize I was asking her to pause her feelings indefinitely. One night, she asked me something simple. "Do you still feel close to me?" I remember the question because I didn't answer it right away. Not because I didn't care, but because I hadn't checked in with myself in a long time. "I think so," I said eventually. She didn't argue, she just nodded. That should have scared me more than any fight ever could. After that, she changed, quietly. She stopped repeating herself, stopped asking follow-up questions, stopped waiting for me to notice when she was hurting. At the time, I thought things were improving. Less tension, less emotional weight. I didn't understand that peace can sometimes mean resignation. We still lived together, still shared meals, still slept in the same bed, but something subtle had shifted. She started waking up earlier than me, leaving notes instead of conversations. Had to run. Have a good day. They weren't cold. They were polite, and that was worse. I noticed she spent more time out of the apartment, long walks, late grocery trips, errands that didn't need to take that long. I didn't ask where she was going. Not because I didn't care, but because asking would require me to engage with answers I wasn't sure I had space for. One evening, I came home later than usual. She was sitting on the couch, lights low, TV off, waiting. That alone felt unfamiliar. "I need to talk to you," she said. Those words didn't scare me either. I thought it was just another conversation. Another thing we'd circle around and eventually postpone. I sat down, tired, still half at work. She looked at me for a long moment before speaking. And in that pause, something in my chest tightened, because for the first time, I had the sense that this wasn't about fixing something. It was about acknowledging what had already been lost. She started slowly. "I don't think you see me anymore." I wanted to interrupt, to explain, to defend myself. But something in her voice stopped me. It wasn't angry. It wasn't dramatic. It sounded resolved. And that's when I realized something I wasn't ready to admit yet. This conversation wasn't the beginning of a problem. It was the end of my chance to pretend there wasn't one. That's what I remember most. No tears, no accusations, just a steady tone that told me she'd already done the hardest part alone. "I feel like I've been talking to you through a closed door," she said. I opened my mouth to respond, then closed it again, because anything I said would sound like an excuse. And we were past that. She explained it carefully, like she didn't want to hurt me. How she'd started measuring her words, how she'd stopped sharing thoughts that didn't feel important enough, how she'd learned which version of herself fit easiest into my life. "I don't blame you," she added. That hurt more than blame ever could. I told her I was just overwhelmed, that work had been heavy, that I was under pressure, that I needed time. I meant all of it, but I didn't hear how familiar those words sounded to her. She nodded again. That nod was becoming a pattern. I know, she said. You've been saying that for a while. I wanted to argue, to point out everything I was doing for us. But somewhere deep down, I knew effort doesn't count if it never reaches the person it's meant for. We sat there for a long time after that, not silent, just suspended, like both of us were waiting for the other to say something that could change the direction of the moment. Neither of us did. Eventually, she stood up, not abruptly, not angrily, just deliberately. I don't think I can keep shrinking myself and call it love, she said. The sentence landed quietly, and somehow that made it heavier. I asked her what she wanted. It felt like the right question, but it was late. I want to feel chosen without having to ask, she replied. I didn't know how to promise something I'd already failed to give. That night, we slept in the same bed, not out of habit, out of hesitation. Our backs turned, not in anger, but in uncertainty. I lay awake listening to her breathing, trying to decide if this was a temporary crack or the beginning of something permanent. I told myself we'd talk more tomorrow. The next few weeks felt surreal. Nothing officially ended. Nothing officially continued. We existed in a gray zone where politeness replaced intimacy. She smiled at me, but it didn't reach her eyes. I started noticing things I'd ignored before. How she paused before speaking. How she no longer waited for my reactions. How she started making plans without checking with me first. She wasn't pushing me away. She was preparing to stand on her own. I told myself I'd step up. Soon, after one more deadline, after one more stressful stretch, I kept believing I had time. One evening, she came home with a small box. She set it on the table between us. I've been looking at apartments, she said. Just like that. No build-up, no drama. I stared at the box like it might explain something. What's in there? I asked. She hesitated. Things I want to keep close, she said. That's when fear finally caught up to me. Not loud fear. Not panic. The quiet kind that settles in your chest and makes everything feel heavier. I asked her if this was it. She didn't answer right away. I don't know yet, she said. But I know I can't stay like this. I wanted to promise change. Real change. But promises felt fragile now. I realized something uncomfortable. I didn't know how to be present without feeling like I was losing momentum, and she didn't know how to stay without losing herself. The night before she was supposed to visit one of the apartments, we sat together again, closer than we had in weeks, not touching, just close enough to feel the distance. I never wanted to leave, she said softly. I just didn't know how to stay without disappearing. I didn't have an answer for that. When she went to bed, I stayed up. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't distracted. No emails, no phone, just the weight of realizing that love doesn't disappear all at once. It erodes, quietly, patiently, until one day you notice there's nothing left to lean on. And that night, for the first time, I understood something that scared me more than losing her. Even if she stayed, we couldn't go back. Nothing dramatic happened. No slammed doors, no final speech, just the sound of a suitcase zipper closing in the next room. I stayed in bed longer than usual. Not because I was tired, because getting up would make it real. She moved quietly, like she didn't want to disturb the version of me that still believed there was time. When she stepped into the doorway, she didn't look angry. She looked resolved. That was worse. I'll be back later to grab the rest, she said. I nodded. That nod again. She paused, hand on the doorframe. I hope you don't think this means you failed, she added. I didn't answer, because I didn't know how to explain that failure wasn't the word. Delay was. After she left, the apartment felt unfamiliar. Not empty, just less resistant. Like the walls no longer had to absorb conversations that never fully happened. I walked through the room slowly. The couch where we'd sat pretending everything was fine. The kitchen table where she'd started eating alone. The spot by the window where she used to stand when she needed air. I hadn't noticed how much space she'd been holding until she stopped. Days passed, then weeks. She moved into a small place across town. We texted occasionally, logistics, neutral updates, weather level conversation. One night she asked if we could meet, just to talk, she wrote. That phrase had lost its innocence. We met at a quiet bar neither of us loved, neutral ground. She looked different, not happier, clearer. She told me the move had been harder than she expected, how she'd cried the first night, how she'd almost turned back. But I didn't, she said. I know. And I meant it. I told her I'd started therapy, not to win her back, but because sitting alone in the quiet had revealed things I couldn't ignore anymore. How I'd learned to equate stillness with stagnation. How I'd confused emotional distance with strength. How I'd treated vulnerability like a liability. She listened, really listened. I wish you'd done this sooner, she said. I didn't argue. We talked for hours, not about fixing things, about understanding them. And for the first time, I realized something strange. We were closer now than we'd been in months, because there was nothing left to protect. When we stood to leave, she hesitated, then hugged me. Not tightly, not briefly, just long enough to acknowledge what we'd been and what we weren't anymore. That hug stayed with me, not as pain, as clarity. Time did what it always does. It softened the sharpest edges. I learned how to sit with discomfort without escaping it, how to be present without feeling trapped, how to speak before silence made decisions for me. We didn't get back together. That's not the kind of ending this is. Months later, I saw her from across the street, laughing, with someone else. My first instinct wasn't jealousy, it was relief. Because I finally understood, some people come into your life not to stay, but to reveal the parts of you that need to change before anyone else can. I went home that night and opened my windows, let the city in, not to move faster, but to stay where I was. I don't tell this story because I lost her. I tell it because I found myself too late for us, but early enough for whoever comes next. And now, when silence shows up, I don't run from it. I listen. Because love doesn't ask you to shrink or rush. It asks you to arrive.